on the CUDA framework by Dr. Bharat from NVIDIA. We'll just wait 2-3 minutes because some people are still joining. We'll just wait for maybe 5 minutes and then we'll start.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please tell me.
Sir, I wanted to ask, like, when will be getting link to the drive you were saying about yesterday?
After the workshop is over.
What, sir?
We'll put it in the after the workshop is over, because right now we are editing them and putting them, uploading them. We'll not send. We'll send you the links and the drive for all the slides. So just give us after the workshop. We'll upload everything.
Okay, sir. And sir, the drive will be having these code files of C language
as much as possible.
Okay,
I cannot say that for everything it will be available. As much as possible it will be available.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please tell.
So will we be getting the recordings of the sessions?
Yes, we will get. We'll upload them in YouTube and send you the link to the YouTube videos.
Thank you, sir.
So when will these recordings be made? How long? I mean,
so they will be there permanently in YouTube. They'll be available permanently in YouTube. Is that your question or something else?
sir, I was trying to ask. So this morning, when I was that, I mean, will it be available this evening or will it be after the workshop?
After the workshop, because it is taking some. We'll do it as soon as possible. It is taking time to, I mean, upload and edit and upload, put all the captions, everything. So just give us some day. We'll try to do it before workshop, but definitely after workshop, we will have everything.
Thank you so much, sir. And sir, one more thing. A lot of us are not able to use the chat. I mean, the text chat.
Yes. The problem is that unless you are a registered user of Team, you won't be able to use the chat. Okay, but don't bother. We are not writing anything in chat. So if you have any question, you can either speak up, unmute yourself and speak, or you can send us an email. So these two modes of communication are only available. You can either send us an email in the address given, or not every time. At the end of the lecture, you can unmute yourself and speak up. Unfortunately, the chat is not working. Chat is not working. So you have to mail us.
Right. Because I think we received a link to join the Microsoft Teams group, but that link does not add us to the group itself.
Yeah,
is that a bug or something?
Yes, so we are initially under the impression that anybody can join, but later we find out the terms and the settings of the MS Teams. We found that guests cannot be joined as a member. Okay, guest cannot be joined as a member, so you have to you can only join this link. You can only join this link.
Thank you, sir.
But YouTube video will put up in YouTube, all this through the web page. In the web page, we will put up all the links. So please don't forget the web page URL. So if you visit the web page URL, you will get all this information, all this content you will get. So please visit the website. Okay, I think we can start. I guess some participants. Yeah, we can start. So let me introduce Bharat Kumar from NVIDIA. Bharat has a long expertise and experience in high performance computing for scientific applications. He has been participating in a number of prominent projects. He is an excellent teacher. We have heard from him before. He is an excellent teacher, and he has immense expertise in these areas, in using CUDA for parallel programming. So today's talk will be on the CUDA platform, and there will be 2 talks, 1 hour each. After that, we can have a brief interaction session, question answer session. So Bharat, over to you. You can please share the screen. And
thank you. I hope you are able to hear me clearly.
We can hear you clearly. We can hear you clearly.
And could you also confirm if you are able to see my screen?
We can see the screen.
Okay. So welcome everyone. I hope you all are having fun in terms of learning different aspects of high performance computing. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me for another session. And I kind of chose the luxury of slightly changing the context in terms of the GPU computing. We were using the term CUDA. I will come to that part. But hopefully, I'm going to cover a lot of fundamentals in this session in order to make you understand the difference between the architectures themselves, rather than showing you a lot of code. Because coding, I believe that anybody can write code if the fundamentals are clear. So I'm going to concentrate in this session as much as possible on the fundamentals to give you a perspective of what GPU computing is all about. First of all, there have been definitions of high performance computing for quite some time now. It has taken its journey from a single core to a vectorized core to multiple cores where you started writing code using OpenMP to distributed computing where we also saw how to use MPI. But finally, high performance computing is a tool which is required to solve some realistic codes or application problems in the scientific domain. It's a parallel computing task. It may be used for different purposes. If you look at GPUs, we started our journey with gaming. Gaming or visualization is actually a parallel computing task. And the gamers are parallelly one of the most demanding users who want zero latency when they play games. If you are a gamer, you would definitely understand that when you're playing the games and if there is a latency, the whole experience goes away. Similarly, in the scientific domain, like in astrophysics or astronomy, you also require algorithms which needs to run in parallel. Artificial intelligence or data analytics have become the new application of high performance computing, where you demand this parallel computing for solving tasks, but in a different algorithmic fashion. But nonetheless, all of them have their application and demand the use of high performance computing. And one of such way which has become really prominent because of certain variations or certain characteristics of the architecture, which is GPU, which stands for Graphics Processing Unit. And we are going to go into that detail. What is GPU computing? GPU computing is nothing but also called as a processor which offloads certain part of your application, which is going to be running in parallel. GPUs basically provide you a way to launch thousands of threads in parallel so that your overall application time goes low. The reason why GPU computing is also called as accelerated computing or heterogeneous computing is because GPUs alone don't cannot sustain. They need a CPU. The CPU basically is the one where you will start your application and you will run tasks like running your operating system and everything runs on the CPU. Your main function starts on the CPU, while a part in your application which is taking majority of your time starts running on the GPU. Like if you had a vector addition, matrix multiplication, fast Fourier transform, which is taking majority of your time in your application, then that gets transferred to the GPU. Rest all parts still continues to run on the CPU. That's why this environment is also referred to as heterogeneous computing. So accelerated computing or heterogeneous computing consists of two kinds of processors. One is CPU, which is your general purpose processor. The other one is GPU. And both of them have their own advantages and characteristics. And we will look at those characteristics in more details. If I were to shorten or were to summarize, even if you're not part of the semiconductor industry, if you would have learned these basics during our college time as well, to any processor or any architecture basically has three main components. ALU, which stands for arithmetic and logic unit, which is your core where your actual computation happens. Control is basically the control logic. Like at this point of time on my laptop, I'm running Microsoft Teams. I'm also running Microsoft PowerPoint, and I'm also running other applications. So, but I have limited set of cores. So the operating system basically also needs to take certain decision of switching between these applications, which is also handled by the control logic within the processor. Also, you have cache to access. If I were to say the fundamental difference between CPU and GPU, CPU basically needs to run many different kinds of application very efficiently. I just give an example like Teams, Microsoft PowerPoint, and all those different kinds of applications. So it needs a large amount of switching logic or control logic. And also it needs to keep the data as near as possible in the cache. While you will see the number of compute units, which is the computation part, is kind of lesser. When I say lesser as compared to what? It's lesser as compared to GPU. GPU on the other side says that I'm not going to do all those other things, like I'm not going to run your operating system and other kinds of tasks. I'm going to just run parts which are parallel in nature, like my for loops, or data parallel loops in parallel. That's why I need more compute, and I'm not going to do a lot of control logic or lesser amount of cache. But we are going to look into more details here. There are, as I said, there are different advantages and disadvantages, or shall I say strength or weakness of every architecture. Does not mean that one is better than the other. Both are very good at doing something, and if used properly, they can give you the best benefit. Like the CPU memory.
Hello, sir. Sorry
Yeah.
for disturbing, but are you sharing something? Are you sharing your slides?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can see. Everybody can see.
Okay.
Okay. I should join.
You should check your connection. Everybody can see. We can see.
Okay. Okay. So like CPU, CPU basically has certain strengths associated with. Like on a CPU, you can have a very large memory. Theoretically, you can have 2 raised to 64 because 64 is your operating system instruction set. You have a 64-bit operating system which you run. So you can have terabytes of memory. Every CPU core is very fast. It runs very fast, like in the range of 3 gigahertz or 4 gigahertz. So every CPU core is very fast. And if you are able to fit your job within this cores, like the CPUs can have up to 40 to 80 cores, and you can fit your job within that you can run it very fast on the CPU. So it can run smaller number of threads very quickly. But there are certain disadvantages of CPU also, weaknesses of CPU. It has very less memory bandwidth. Even though it gives you a large memory, Fundamentally, many of the applications are memory bound, and I will come to that part. But the memory bandwidth of your CPU is very low. To give you a number, it is in the range of around 200 gigabytes per second. So you can read from your CPU RAM at a speed of around 200 gigabytes per second. Also, since your CPU runs at a very high core, they are also proven to be taking more power. So when I talk about performance per watt, they are not so green in nature, and that's why we also have an alternative to use GPUs, which are much more green in nature, which means they will consume lesser power. On the other side, as I told, your GPU, basically one of the key advantages of the GPU is that it provides you with a very high bandwidth main memory. The GPU memory is in few terabytes per second. If you remember in the CPU, I said it is in few gigabytes per second. On the GPU, it is in few terabytes per second. So you can actually read data very, very fast on the GPU. It provides you more number of cores. The latest GPUs have few thousand cores. Like Volta architecture has 5120 cores. These cores are somewhat different from the CPU, and that's why you see that they are of different size as compared to the CPU, because they run very simple data parallel jobs, but you get a lot of them. So you can have practically launching thousands of threads running on these cores in parallel. Also, GPUs are proven to be more green in nature, which means the amount of performance that you can get out of the power that you're going to use on that GPU is also very, very low. So it's much more greener in nature. That's why there is a list of green supercomputers around the world, and you will see GPU architectures kind of dominate in that particular ring. Now the question is, I said GPU is very good and everything, right? But I would like to slightly change my question now and say, instead of how GPU computing works, I am going to move towards a more fundamental question on why GPU computing works. Because this why will kind of explain to you on why you should be looking at different kinds of architectures, not just from a GPU point of view, right? So the more important question that usually any application developer need to ask is where my data sits. Now you might feel, why am I bringing this question? But let me take you through a journey of explaining some of these concepts one by one. If I were to make a statement that nobody cares about flops, which means I'm saying that the current measure of a computer is based on flops, means floating point operations per second. That's how you measure how strong my compute requirement of that particular processor is, how much I can compute. And I'm making a statement that nobody cares about flop. Now, this may be a very, very contradictory statement, or some of the users might even feel that this is not the right statement to make. Yes, it may not be a right statement to make in certain domains, but let me rephrase my thing to say almost nobody really cares about flops because of the reasons I'm going to cover later on for you. So let's take an example. If you had a CPU, the CPU basically has certain memory attached to it, which is called as RAM or DRAM. Let's look at some of the numbers. Your RAM, as I said, is able to provide you data at 200 gigabytes per second, which means you can read when you are doing any operation, you are going to read that from the memory and you can read it at 200 gigabytes per second. But if you look at your CPU flops, it is in teraflops. Here is an example where I am saying my CPU flops, or the number of operations I can do per second, is in 2 teraflops per second. Now you are able to see where I am going at, right? So when I read the data, generally in high performance computing, we read not just 1 byte data, mostly all of our data types are double in nature, which means I am going to read 8 bytes. So if I divide this 200 gigabytes per second by 8, I can read 25 giga floating point 8 bytes per second. That's the speed at which I can read from the memory. If I were to now have a ratio, which means I have two kinds of numbers with me. One is the processing rate, and the second one is at which rate I can read. And the ratio of both is called as compute intensity, which is nothing but the floating point operations I can do divided by the amount of data that I can provide to my compute units. So if I do this for a CPU, it comes to 80. Why is this 80 important? Which means that if I were to do any operation on any of the data, I will have to do it 80 times before mitigating the amount of time spent in reading that data. It's like this. If I were to eat a pizza or something like that, I can eat it very fast because maybe I am very hungry. But if I have to go from here to a nearby, say Pizza Hut or any other place, if it takes more time for me, that is the more of overhead rather than the actual eating itself, right? So that's a very naive analogy that I'm trying to give you to make you understand why just flops are not important, right? So for every number I load from the memory, which means if I want to read even one data, I need to do basically 80 operations to break even, right? So if it takes certain amount of time for me to compute, I need to do it 80 times before even because it is taking 80 times more to fetch the data. Just fetching is taking more time. That's the most important number to understand. And if I were to show you these numbers for different kinds of CPUs and GPUs out there, this is how it looks like. So there is the AMD ROM is from AMD, the CPU. It basically provides you these many floating FP64 gigaflops you can see. The memory bandwidth is also mentioned here. The same is mentioned for Intel Xeon processor, which is mentioned. These are all one of the latest architectures on CPU. And at the same time, for the GPU also, which is our latest architecture, NVIDIA A100, it provides you more flops, obviously, and it provides you more terabytes. But still, the compute intensity is almost at the same level of CPU and GPU, which means it takes a long time for me to fetch the data before even processing it, right? Whether it is CPU, whether it is GPU does not matter. It takes more time to fetch the data because of the ratio of flop to compute. And that's the most important part for anybody to understand. So, and that's why I made a statement that almost nobody really cares about the flops. What we should worry about is actually the memory bandwidth, because that's the rate at which I can fetch. But is that everything? Maybe not. And I'm going to introduce you to one more concept, which is even the bandwidth might not matter in case you're not hiding the latency, and which is what I'm going to talk to you about in this session so that you understand the difference between them. Let's take a very simple example. This is one of the basic examples in BLAS, which is basic linear algebra routines used in high performance computing, which says alpha x plus y equal to z. So you're multiplying a scalar value to a vector and adding it to another vector and storing it. So if you see here, you're doing y of I equal to alpha into xi plus yi. If you see here, the number of floating point operations that you're doing is only two, which is multiply and addition. Alpha value multiplied to xi and an addition where you're adding that value to yi. The number of memory loads are also two, xi and yi are being read. And this can be combined together. Some of the architectures combine them into one operation, one actual operation, which is called as fuse multiplier. Let's look at, in a realistic world, how it works when you do this operation, when you run anything on the processor. You will do load of x0, which means as soon as it comes to this statement, the first instruction which will get executed is bring x from the memory, like bring x of 0. But x of 0 will take certain cycles to be brought in, which I told you, right? Because it takes certain time to bring or fetch that memory. So what the compiler will do is it will go ahead and see that yi also I can do. So it says load y. Now after this, it is going to be a very long duration for this memory to be brought in, before the X actually becomes ready. This is what is the latency part which I was talking about. So it takes amount of time to even load this data before even you can do any kind of a parallel operation or anything like that, right? So the X becomes ready here. And then when the X becomes ready, you start doing this operation, actual operation of alpha into X. At the same time, the Y also becomes ready till the time you are computing and you will do this operation. So now you can see that even though I would have given you more amount of computation would not have mattered, because actually the computation becomes faster, but the memory is your main bottleneck. And then finally you add it to Y and your results are kind of ready here. Now this is your bottleneck actually, if you ask me, and not this part. This is much more easier to handle as compared to this part. So what makes it really different, or what makes it different for the GPUs and all, we'll come to that part. Let's look at some numbers. So this is the speed of light. So all of us know that what is the speed of light. It's quite very fast, right? So I don't need to go into that part. How does our computer run? What's their running speed? So some of you might know that it's measured in something called as gigahertz. You have your computer clocks running at 3 gigahertz. The higher the gigahertz, the faster your compute can actually work, right? That's your clock cycle. It's like one tick and the clock moves to the next one and it will switch on or off your transistors. So in one clock tick, a light travels basically 100 millimeter, or it's around 4 inches or something like in that number, right? But the speed of electricity in silicon would be slightly different, because it's not traveling in the air, but it is actually going inside your chip, right? So this is what would be the speed of electricity inside your silicon, which is kind of mentioned here. So in short, anything which travels within your chip can travel within one clock tick. The electricity can travel only 20 millimeters, or around 0.8 inches. And that's what I was referring to you, right? So if this is your chip, so if you look at your chip size, it's 22 millimeter to 32 millimeter. This is what your general CPU or GPU or whatever it looks like. And your RAM is somewhere else, and you have this lanes through which the memory is actually going to get transferred. So this memory obviously transfer makes it additional overhead, right? But let's look at more details of what I was trying to say here, right? So this is an example of Intel Xeon 8280. So the memory bandwidth is in the range of 131 GB per second. And I told you the memory latency, based on the calculation which I showed you some time back, it takes around 89 nanoseconds before I get this data to me. So, based on this gigabytes per second, what does it mean is that I can actually transfer 11,659 bytes. So I can transfer this much of data, but it will still take me 89 nanoseconds from here to reach here. But if you see, in a non-parallel computing environment, you're actually fetching only 16 bytes, which means when I was running for I equal to 0, I is less than whatever number I plus plus, when I was doing y of I, z of I equal to alpha something, which is this calculation here, I'm actually working only on 16 bytes, even though I can transfer so much of bytes in one shot, which means it is going to take 89 nanoseconds to travel, but at the same time, I'm also wasting my effort or the memory speed, which is in certain gigabytes per second, in case I do sequential job. What I'm referring to is, if you do sequential job, you are basically wasting 99.86% of your time. You're not basically doing any justice to the overall architecture which you are having at this point of time. So if I were to show the comparison of the same algorithm in terms of efficiency for different chips, again the same thing. The memory bandwidth is kind of mentioned here, like for Intel Xeon it's 131. The latency I told you is around 89, and the peak bytes that I can transfer is this much. So the memory efficiency, if I work on only one element there, is only 0.14%. In fact, in case of GPU, if you work only on one memory element, it is actually really worse. So a sequential job on the GPU is going to be really, really bad on the GPU. If you are transferring only 16 bytes, which means you are practically working only on one element, right? And so if I were to solve that problem, and if I were to make my memory bandwidth much more better, ideally, how much of elements I should work on in parallel, right? That's the question. Since I can transfer 11,659 bytes and each and every DAXP operation takes 16 bytes, what I mean to say is that the actual number of parallel operation actually I should do or ask for, the amount of data that I should ask for is 729. If I just divide this number, ideally I should have launched 729 threads, or I should have asked for 729 of different elements together in one shot to be worked on, so that I could utilize the whole bandwidth and not waste any cycles. This is a pure calculation, theoretical calculation, telling that this is how much I need to hide that latency which was there earlier. 729 operations per second, without which we are not doing a good job even on the CPU. So if you would have gone through some of the lectures which were there, one of the possible ways on the CPU is something called as loop unrolling. What loop unrolling does, it just unrolls the loop in a way that your compiler understands that each and every instruction here is independent of each other, and it can basically get all of those elements in one shot, right? So there are possible ways on the CPU also how you can launch or add concurrency in terms of this pipeline that I just showed some time back, in terms of the number of fetch that you can do, which is actually in this particular case around 729, but it has its own limitation. It will not reach 729. But the real option is not sequential programming or concurrency. The real option is actually launching multiple threads. If you don't launch multiple threads, your processor that you get is not getting utilized. It's an injustice to the processor which is there. It doesn't matter whether it is GPU or whether it is CPU, because if you do sequential operation, most of your time is just spent in fetching data here and there. So the best option is to launch threads. So you can launch so many threads and then basically try to fetch all that data in one shot, which is the number which I told you, 729 of them at least. But can you launch 729 in parallel or not is a different thing altogether. I told you that there are certain limitations, like on the CPU, on the maximum number of threads that you can do, or the maximum number of memory requests that you can do. But I hope you are getting the context of why I also need parallelism, not just from a point of view of I can do it, but from a point of view that if you're buying a system and if you're not launching it in parallel, it's basically a high unutilization of your processor to its extreme. Let's look at this particular example. Again, once I launch the number of threads, now this is a very, very important comparison for you to understand. On the GPUs, the memory speed is this much, 1.5 terabyte. On AMD ROM, it is 204 gigabytes. On Intel Xeon, it is 143 gigabytes. The latency is mentioned, but the peak bytes per latency is also mentioned. So my memory efficiency, if I load only via one thread in the sequential world, is this. But if I were to hide that latency by the amount of threads which are allowed in a particular CPU or GPU, is this row, which is threads required. On an Ampere card, which is A100, you are allowed to launch 221,000 threads. 221,184 threads you can launch on an Ampere card. On an AMD ROM, the maximum number which could be allowed is in the range of few thousand. Here you can see 2048. Or an Intel Xeon processor, it is 896. Now I'm again coming to the thread ratio. Why is this important? I told you that I need certain amount of threads to hide that latency, right? And there is certain restriction of the hardware on which the number of threads I can launch. So if you see here, both AMD and Intel processors, they do a very good job in terms of the number of threads that you can launch so that you can actually hide that latency which I talked about. But surprisingly, GPUs perform really well. You can see here, the GPU actually provides you more number of threads that you can launch on a GPU as compared to the number of bytes which are required to be transferred to hide that transfer latency that I just talked about. Somehow the GPU architecture is designed in a way that you can actually oversubscribe the GPU and launch large number of threads CPU. You can see here the number of threads which are available on the GPU versus the number of threads which are available on the CPU, which means you can practically launch a lot of them. So this is what was one of the key characteristics of the GPU, and I would like to show you some of the more details of how the GPU looks like. But the GPU architecture I some time back is very simple architecture, but it is much more complicated in nature. I'm not going to go into that detail, but you can see here that you can actually launch 2,21,184 threads. So the number of threads that you can launch is much more higher as compared to the number of cores which are available. And that's what we call is oversubscription, which means you can launch more number of threads as compared to the number of cores and hide that latency, and you can utilize the GPU in a much more efficient fashion. If I were to simplify all this complexity which I just told you some time back, in short, the fundamental difference between a CPU and a GPU is of something called as throughput versus latency. This is an example here of our headquarters where we have our office is something called as NVIDIA Endeavor. And if you are moving from San Francisco where the airport is, if you land there, you will reach San Francisco and then you have to travel to San Jose where the NVIDIA headquarters is. Suppose if you were to do that operation, right? You have two choices in which you can take. One choice is that you can choose a train, or the second choice is you can take a taxi or a car and go. The good thing about a car is that it reaches very fast. It reaches in 45 minutes. While yes, the train, it has multiple stops in between and it is going to take more time. It generally takes twice the amount of time before reaching the destination. But the good main thing about the difference is when you take a car, the maximum amount of people who can sit in that particular car is 1, 2, or 3, not more than that. But how many of them can you have in a car and how many of them you can pick on your way when you're having these stops, right? So when your car is moving very fast, at the same time, your while even though GPU is slightly slower, but it has this advantage that it can actually take more number of people, and when one of them is moving and is waiting for something, it can switch and then on the same lane, somebody else can start working. So you can actually take more number of people at the same time, right? So to do the same thing in a car environment, and if you were to take thousands of people together in a car, this is what will happen, right? Either you will get stuck because of this issue, or you will end up going back and forth between the San Francisco and the office, between the airport and the office, picking up 3 people going back, picking up 3 people going back. But instead of that, you can choose this other throughput based approach where first of all, you can take more of this because you can launch so many threads, first of all, right? So you can do it in one shot and you can basically save in this pipelining fashion all that, you can hide all that latency which otherwise is not possible in the CPU architecture. And that's what is the reason or the fundamental difference between the CPU architecture and the GPU architecture. And I'm still not saying that one architecture is better over the other. They are meant for doing two different operations. Like GPUs cannot run an operating system. It's not very good because it doesn't have the same amount of cache and all those other things that I talked about like CPU has, but it can do other operations very fast. And and the operations that you start doing on a GPU may not be completely in a different fashion, but let me give you an overview of different kinds of tasks also that you can do, right? When I talk about parallel computing tasks, not all threads want to work independently. In an example that I gave you, a DAXP is basically an operation which we just saw where xi and yi, you are basically having all of them as independent operation. While there are different other operations where you need to communicate among the elements, like if you're working in the artificial intelligence space, convolution is an operation where you're going to talk to the neighboring pixels and average the value of the neighboring pixels, which means if you're launching parallel threads, you need to have some certain communication among the threads so that you can get the data from the neighboring threads. While there are certain communications which are much more intensive, like all-to-all communication, one of the biggest example of it is fast Fourier transforms, which is very common in astronomy field also or astrophysics field also, because it's part of this signal processing. And all of us know that Fourier transforms basically requires all-to-all communication. So based on the kinds of communication, you will have this kind of a parallelism, or you might end up, you need to talk within a space, or you might have to talk to everyone. And that will also decide on how much parallelism is available and which programming framework provides you that amount of parallelism. To give you an example here, let's take a example here of a cat. Suppose I wanted to do certain operation on this image. What I can do is I can overlay with a grid. This is very similar to your CFD example also indirectly if you were to choose. And I can divide this work among blocks which are split across. These blocks can basically independently execute, and we can oversubscribe the GPU, which I just told you some time back, with many thousands of them, right? And within the block, you can actually communicate with each other at second level. So the first level is you have your overall process, which is supposed to be work. You independently chunk them into different blocks, and within the block, you want to communicate or say do a convolution operation. In that case, you can launch more threads. So it's a two level of parallelism that I'm talking about. Wherever you want to communicate, you do it within, and all these blocks can independently talk to each other. So based on the type of application you have, you may not just require one kind of parallelism. You may require this parallelism where nobody talks to each other. There is another kind of a parallelism where you would require certain amount of communication and these threads should be able to communicate. Or the last is where everybody needs to talk to each other. And this is what is different level of parallelism in which you have to divide your work in the real world when you are working on it. And I'm not going to go in that part, but I would like to summarize the parts which I just talked about, and I will open it for certain questions because I know some of these topics are quite intense, but it kind of gives you a feeling of what do I mean by why is it necessary to even understand why sequential programming is not the option, or whether it is CPU or GPU does not matter. And when it comes to GPU, why GPU outperforms because of the oversubscription or the number of threads that you can practically launch on a GPU. So the first thing that we talked about is why flops don't matter. Because even if you have a higher amount of compute, it's not going to matter because most of the time is actually spent in bringing the memory. When I bring this memory, what we also saw was it's not the bandwidth which matters because the latency of fetching from one location to the other itself is the bottleneck. Then we talked about the oversubscription on the GPU because in order to hide that latency, you have to launch more number of threads on the GPU so that if one thread is waiting, you can switch to the other and make it work, right? And I gave you an example of why there is a fundamental difference between CPU and GPU is the throughput versus the latency based architecture, because the GPUs can launch thousands of threads as compared to your other architectures and hide this latency, which I just talked about in a much more better fashion. And the last but not the least, what I talked to you about is different applications have different requirements in terms of memory and communication and compute. We can't say that if one application gets this much of, if it reaches 80% of your throughput and the other one reaches 40% of your throughput, does not mean the 40% is better, is not doing well as compared to 80%, because it depends on the nature of the algorithm. The algorithm, if is all to all, obviously you are doing a more communication and it will never reach the peak of your compute. While the element wise or some other kinds of operations, they will reach almost the peak, and that's why you will see different parallelism or different kinds of numbers there. So this is what I wanted to cover in the first part to make everybody understand the fundamentals, which is not the part of the why the flops don't matter so much and all those things. So with that, I would like to see if any of you have any questions, because we are not having a chat. So I believe the only method is to unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Bharat. Thank you for the excellent talk. Participants, we will now take the questions. So, Ritabrata, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, sir. Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, you are audible.
Sir, what did you say was the full form of GPU, graphic processing unit?
Yes.
So why is a graphic? I mean, it's not that it only produces pictures or analyzes picture.
It's a very important question which I was going to cover in the next section, but let me give you an overview. So NVIDIA was the inventor of GPU where, so think of what is graphics processing, right? So earlier the graphics processing was also done by CPUs, central processing unit, right? In the earlier days, and still you have many of the processor which come without a graphics processor. Earlier, the graphics requirements were not very high. So CPU was running the operating system at the same time. It was also doing the job of graphics processing, and it was also doing other kinds of jobs like networking. It used to also run the networking protocols of sending your packets across and all. But over time, the graphics requirements increased. We started talking about high definition graphics, and different kinds of application wanted more amount of high definition graphics. If you were to give that task to the CPU, CPU was doing a lot of part in the graphics rather than doing other job of running the operating system, right? And fundamentally, graphics processing is a parallel computing job. What is graphics processing? You have a pixel image that you want to paint on the screen. So if your definition is 1024 or 1024, if you look at the graphics pipeline, what it does, it paints the pixel like red, green, and blue value across the whole image 1024 by 1024. So which means all that 1024 or 1024 RGB values are independent calculations which the graphics processor does, right? So it was one of the first application of offloading the implementation of graphics to the GPUs. So GPUs were born to do the parallel computing job of graphics on a separate processor so that the CPU gets freed for running other tasks which it was supposed to run. Another example of offloading is an example of networking. Earlier, even the networking was running on the CPUs, but over time, we realized that if you want to do that, CPU cycle goes there. So you started getting networking chips with where now your networking stack runs on those chips rather than on the CPU. So it's an offloading model where it started, and that's why the name graphics processing unit continues, even though it is a parallel computing task. And that parallel computing task can be graphics, it can be fast Fourier transforms, it can be artificial intelligence. But since it was named GPU, it continues to be named as GPU. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ritabrata. Asa Lakshmi, can you please unmute yourself? Asa Lakshmi? Okay, maybe she has a problem. Ashish Kumar Khanna, you may please unmute and speak. Hello, Ashish? Sana?
Hi, this is Sana, and thanks for the very nice lecture that you have given. My question is that you have said that in order to reduce the memory latency in the GPU, you have some extra threads for that. Can't we add the same concept to the CPUs in order to reduce the memory latency and increase the memory bandwidth for the CPU cores? Can't we do the same thing there?
No, it's a very interesting question. In fact, taking into consideration the time, I kind of skipped that part to a certain extent, but let me give you an overview of that part also so that you get an idea of what I mean, right? So just give me a second. Let me just go to the slide where I was talking about why CPUs cannot do that, right? Why can't they launch so many threads in short, right? So let me give you an overview of the memory hierarchy as well. So it might not be so much of visible here, but let me try. So you have to consider this fact that hardware is the core and software is the thread, right? So from a thread perspective, you have to understand that that when you create the number of threads, like when you create a thread, it has to store certain values in certain memory, right? Like let's take an example of where does that memory hierarchy look like. So if you look at the memory hierarchy, you will have your RAM, then above your RAM, you will have certain cache, and above the cache, like you will have L2 cache, L1 cache, and finally you have something called as registers. The registers are the fastest set of memory which is available in any processor, and they are the most I would say costly memory also. The higher number of registers, the faster memory you can get, right? So it's a memory hierarchy. So when you create threads, I'm giving an example. When you create threads, in that particular case, ideally, if you want to switch between threads in a CPU environment, if you see, the CPUs don't have a large number of registers. If you would have seen, the CPUs have limited set of registers, while on the GPU, you have large amount of registers. Like in the Ampere, you can say per SM, you get almost 256K registers, which is very, very high in number. So in the GPU, every thread basically gets its own set of registers to store its data. That's why when you switch from one thread to the other to hide that latency, it is very, very fast. While in case of CPUs, the registers are very, very low. They are very limited in number. So where will, in case you launch more number of threads on the CPU, they will basically go into cache or sometimes even below that memory hierarchy. And when you context switch between the threads, you will end up spending a lot of time in taking one thread context and putting it into the other thread, and that itself will take more time and it will add to the latency rather than reducing it. And that's one of the key difference. The second difference also is in the CPU world, the context switching between the threads is done by your operating system. It's a software concept. While on the GPU, the context switching is actually inside the hardware, which means the hardware takes care of context switching between the threads because you can actually also store everything in the registers. So the latency of switching is very, very minimalistic, almost negligible. The same thing if you do on the CPU, you will end up doing a lot of transfers between the cache and not helping in any way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the only thing was that I was thinking in the opposite way. I had heard somewhere that the number of registers on the GPU are very less, and on the CPUs they are in abundance. So there was a little confusion, and that's why. But you answered it well. I'm glad. Thanks.
Yeah. So I would be very glad to see where did you read it because because I am not very sure and where that article is, and so.
I had attended one FDP at IIT New Delhi, and I think I had read it from there. So I'll just reconfirm. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Sana. Tejas, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Uh,
Please go ahead.
Question is like we have studied the concept of pipelining in computer architecture. So is this the same concept on threads like we work on instructions, or is it different somehow? And if it is
It is
different, then how
slightly
does it
different. It is slightly different. And I gave you an example of pipelining some time back where I was showing you this figure where I said that when I want to transfer like this, right, I want to transfer so many bytes and the number I came to, right? So I basically, when I do this loop unrolling, I'm actually doing this concept of pipelining.
Okay.
So what I am doing is I am creating a pipeline where all these instructions are independent of each other, right? When I unroll, I am telling to the compiler that all these instructions are independent of each other, right? And this is what creates the pipeline where the compiler will take care and understand these instructions are independent of each other and it will start firing. And pipeline is a concept of concurrency, which I explained here. But concurrency is limited in nature, right? You still need parallelism to hide this overall thing which I told you, along with concurrency. Alone concurrency is not going to solve your problem. It will solve a problem to a bit where I said that you can do loop unrolling. How much you will unroll? 8, 16, you won't be able to unroll up to 800 of them, right?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Tejas. Ayush, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the great talk, sir. My question was, well, you explained really well that in DexP, when you do that, there's the different threads can perform independently. Can you explain a bit about fast Fourier transforms and why that involves more interaction more communication between different threads? And what would you use in that case? Would you want to parallelize that, or do you want to
No, no.
do
So
that in a more serious?
fast Fourier transform themselves can also be parallelized. It's not that they cannot be parallelized, but let's look at an example of the ratio of communication to computation or the memory or the communication to computation part, right? If I look at the element-wise DAXP operation, every thread is independent of each other. This one will read x of 0, store it in y0, x1, y1, x2, y2. Practically, this is called as the embarrassingly parallel job where you can work. In fast Fourier transform as a logic where you can create multiple threads and every thread will work on its own signal. But at the same time, if you look at the fast Fourier transform at one particular point, you will have to exchange the computation that you have done to rest all parallel threads also. Is the nature of the algorithm itself. It's all-to-all communication in nature where you will have to send your computation data to all the rest all threads which are running in parallel. So that's why fast Fourier transforms also have this. It's a research field where even on the CPU world, how do you write fast Fourier transforms in a way that it can scale across nodes, because you will like to hide this latency of sending this data across all these threads with the computation that you're going to also do. It's the nature of the algorithm itself, right? So think about this. You will do certain computation, and after that computation steps, you're going to communicate that to everyone. So the communication, where will it go to? The communication, in case you are in the memory, it will go via the memory, or in case you are going across, in that case, it will go via InfiniBand or PCIe or any kind of Ethernet based system. And majority of your time will be spent in transferring that data rather than doing the actual computation. So you would be bound by communication rather than the computation in this particular case.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Himanshu,
much.
yeah, please. Yeah. So Rahul, can you speak? Himanshu, you want to speak? You can speak.
Yeah, it's me, Himanshu. Yeah. So like I wanted to know like what are the dangers or limitations of doing scientific computing on commercially available gaming cards as opposed to the professional quadro cards?
Commercially available gaming cards. Okay, so gaming cards versus the quadro cards, right? And there is nothing called as a danger, as in nothing will blast off for sure. Okay, so let me give an example. So first thing, if you write, I'm going to cover that part later on also, but if you write your code on the GPU architecture, it can run on all the devices, which means it can run on an embedded device like we have something called a Jetson with ARM. It can also run on your laptop. It can also run on a gaming card. It can also run on a Quadro professional graphics card. It can also run on a Tesla card, which is your server card. What changes is as follows, right? So on generally our graphics card which are used for gaming are basically 32-bit precision cards, which means they are not meant for doing high performance computing 64-bit. If you look at graphics, graphics is a 32-bit operation. It's not a 64-bit operation, right? So if you start doing, even though you can run on all of this, your performance will completely vary, right? Because the amount of 64-bit which your Quadro or your cards like Tesla will give will not be given by your gaming cards. You can write, you can test, it will all run, but it will not give you the same performance which is there on a Tesla card. That's one example of the compute. So when you buy any card, it will have 32-bit rating, 64-bit rating, 8-bit rating, 16-bit rating. You have to read those flops calculations. That was the flop part. The second part is the bandwidth part. I told you that the memory bandwidth of an Ampere card is 1.5 terabytes. It is with a specialized memory called as HBM2, which is only provided in these cards. It doesn't come in the graphics card which are used for your gaming, because gaming doesn't require that. So you have a different card there, which is memory, which is called a GDDR5 and not HBM2. So the bandwidth of your gaming cards is lesser as compared to these compute cards. So again, repeating, the compute and the memory part of your gaming is very different from the compute and memory that you get in this professional cards as well, right? Based on that, you will see those performance difference. You can't use the gaming cards for benchmarking as such for some of these applications. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you. Ratul, you want to speak? You can maybe unmute. Maybe this is the last question you can take. Ratul, you can unmute.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your great lecture, sir. So I was asking that the GPU code are used. GPU processor can use the GPU memory, right? Only the GPU memory. Can the GPU processor can access the RAM of CPU?
It can access the RAM of the CPU also. Over the newer generation of cards and with newer CUDA versions, we did introduce a concept which is called as unified memory, where your CPU and GPU, so for you, it will look like one big chunk of memory, like you allocate something and the pointer is going to point to a big chunk of memory which can be accessed by both CPU and the GPU. It's possible to do that, and this feature is called as unified memory. It is heavily used in certain contexts also, especially like in data analytics and all, when you cannot fit everything inside one GPU. Given that, still the memories are physically different, which means the CPU, if you touch the memory on the CPU, the page of that memory gets transferred to the CPU. If you are accessing it on the GPU, it gets transferred to the GPU behind the scene. It's just that you won't know it as a programmer. Behind the scene, the driver is going to do this transfer. So now you can imagine, if you have not written a good program, and if it keeps on shuffling between CPU and GPU, in that particular case, the performance can go down very, very drastically. And you need to understand
that's I faced actually. So we have the some huge amount of data. So the GPU RAM is limited. So we cannot transfer.
But you can hide that memory by overlapping your communication with computation, because all of the GPU calls are asynchronous in nature. So I'll be happy. I'm going to provide my email ID later on. If you are interested, I will be happy to talk to you, look at your application and see how we can improve your application performance on the GPU.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe just one last question. So Sisir, do you want to ask something? Ashish, you have already asked. Sisir, you want last question?
Yes. What is the reason that GPUs have low memory limits as compared to CPUs?
I just gave you an example. We can give you higher memory bandwidth. So there is a trade-off always which happens, right? If you're giving a higher memory, this higher memory bandwidth like HBM2, it's like a 3D stacked memory. It's the physics which gets involved. And if you give it larger, you can't increase the speed, bandwidth and lower the latency at the same time, right? It's a trade-off. So it is the physics which kicks in short, if I were to say, right?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank
so thank you, Bharat, for the excellent talk and patiently answering all the questions. We'll now take a short break we'll come back at 3:30.